The night everything changed, I was standing in my own kitchen at 11:30, watching my son-in-law eat the last of the peach cobbler I'd made from scratch. My mother's recipe, the one I'd been saving for Sunday dinner, and he didn't even look up. That image stayed with me long after everything else fell apart. Not the big dramatic moments, not the lawyers or the locked doors or the morning the police called, just that. A man scraping the bottom of my ceramic dish with a fork while my daughter watched television in the next room, and me standing there thinking, how did I let it get this far? Let me back up. My name is Nadine. I'm 63 years old, retired from 31 years as an administrative director at a regional hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. I own my home outright. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a back porch I built onto the house myself after my husband Harold passed in 2014. I planted wisteria along the railing. It blooms every April without fail. Harold would have loved it. I have one daughter, Roxanne. She's 34, and until about 2 years ago, I would have described her as the best thing that ever happened to me. I still love her. I want to be clear about that. But love and trust are 2 different things, and what happened over the past 18 months taught me that lesson in a way I will never forget. Roxanne met her husband, Felix, at a work conference in Atlanta. She called me that same weekend, practically breathless. "Mama, he's different," she said. "He really listens." I remember sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, smiling into the phone. My daughter was happy. What mother doesn't want that? They dated for 14 months. He seemed fine, polite enough at the holidays, always had an answer for everything, which I noticed but chose not to dwell on. He worked in something called brand strategy consulting, which as far as I could tell meant he worked from his laptop and talked a lot about opportunities. They got married in the fall. Beautiful ceremony. Roxanne wore a dress that cost $4,000, which she mentioned at the reception more than once. Felix's toast went on for 11 minutes. I counted. 3 weeks after the wedding, Roxanne called me. "Mama, Felix's contract ended and we're in between apartments. Could we just stay with you for a little while, just until he lands the next project?" A little while. That phrase should come with a warning label. Of course, I said, because she was my daughter, because I had the room, because I had the room, because I thought I knew what a little while meant. I did not. They arrived with 14 boxes, 3 suitcases, Felix's enormous standing desk, and a dog I hadn't been informed about. The dog, a large, indifferent husky named Duke, immediately claimed the Levee seat in my living room that had belonged to my mother. "He sheds a little," Felix said, carrying in a second monitor for his standing desk setup, "but he's really a great dog once you get to know him." I got to know Duke's hair. It was on everything within a week. The first month wasn't terrible. There were growing pains. Felix worked from the dining room table until I mentioned gently that I actually used the dining room. He moved to the guest room. Roxanne helped with groceries maybe twice. There were dishes left in the sink, lights left on, normal things, adjustments. But then small things started shifting in ways I couldn't quite name at first. My thermostat was changed. I keep the house at 72 in the fall. I came downstairs one morning and it was set to 68. When I mentioned it, Felix said, "Cooler is actually better for sleep, Nadine. There's research on it. Not sorry. Not I'll change it back." Just information, delivered like I was the one who needed correcting. Roxanne said nothing. A week later, I noticed my good olive oil was gone. The kind from the small Italian grocery on Central Avenue, $12 a bottle. In its place was a plastic jug of vegetable oil from a bulk store. I found the empty olive oil bottle in the recycling. When I asked Roxanne about it, she said Felix had done a grocery run and thought it made more sense economically. He was trying to help, Mama. I didn't ask for help with my groceries, baby. She looked at the floor, said nothing else. I kept notes. Not because I was planning anything at that point, but because I've always been organized. It's how I survived 31 years in hospital administration. You write things down, you document. You don't rely on memory alone when things get complicated. So I started keeping a small spiral notebook in my nightstand drawer. Dates, times, incidents, receipts. I noticed going missing from the counter, a bottle of wine from my rack that disappeared. The night I came home from my friend Odessa's house to find Felix had rearranged my living room furniture while I was gone because, he said, the flow is better this way. I moved my furniture back the next morning. He put it back again that afternoon. Felix likes things a certain way, Roxanne told me, like this was a reasonable explanation. Roxanne, I said slowly, this is my house. I know, Mama. He has strong opinions about space. I wrote it all down. Month 4, I overheard a phone call. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was watering my plants on the back porch and the kitchen window was cracked open. Felix was inside, talking to someone, his brother, I think, based on context. He was describing my home. My house. He said, it's a good-sized place, actually. 3 beds, nice lot. Property values in this neighborhood have gone up about 20% since 2020. If she ever decided to downsize, I stood very still with the watering can in my hand. She'd probably clear a good amount. Could set us up real nice. I went inside, set the watering can in the sink, went upstairs and called my attorney, a woman named Clara who had handled Harold's estate and whom I trusted completely. I didn't tell her what I was planning to do. I didn't know yet. I just wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to feel like I had one person in my corner who was actually on my side. How are you, Nadine? She asked. I'm fine, I said. I'll be in touch. After that, I started paying closer attention to my finances. I have 2 checking accounts, a money market, and a retirement account. I'd given Roxanne a secondary card on one checking account years ago for emergencies. Just emergencies. That had always been the understanding. I pulled up the statements online that evening. There were 47 transactions in the previous 2 months I hadn't made. 47. Meal delivery, a streaming service I'd never signed up for. Gas stations on the other side of town. A home goods store. 3 charges from a place called Optimized Life Solutions that appeared to be some kind of online business course Felix was taking. $612. I sat at my desk for a long time, looking at that screen. I didn't confront them that night. I had learned in 31 years of managing complicated people in high-pressure situations that you don't move until you're ready. You gather, you plan, you make sure that when you act, you have everything you need and they have no warning. I called my bank the next morning. I reported the unauthorized charges. The woman on the phone was patient and thorough. I had the card associated with Roxanne's name deactivated. I opened a new account, just mine, just my name, and began moving my funds, methodically, without drama. Then I waited. I didn't wait long. It was a Tuesday in February. Cold, but not the bitter kind, just gray and still. I had gone to bed early with a book and was asleep by 9:30. My phone rang at 12:47 in the morning. I looked at the screen. Felix. I felt a cold alertness settle over me, the kind that doesn't feel like fear and doesn't feel like anger. Just clarity. Pure, focused clarity. I answered. Nadine. His voice was tight. Controlled, but barely. There's a situation. Roxanne and I are in Nashville. I hadn't known they were in Nashville. The hotel is saying our card was declined. We need you to cover it tonight and we'll settle everything when we get back. It's about $1,500. I said, which card? He paused. The one Roxanne has, your account. That card's been canceled, I said. Silence. What do you mean it's canceled? I mean it no longer works. It's been deactivated, Nadine. His voice shifted. Harder now. We are stuck at a hotel in Asheville. We need the money tonight. I need you to either reinstate the card or wire the funds. This isn't a request. This isn't a request. I let those words sit in the air for a moment. Felix, I said calmly, I suggest you call your family. My family doesn't. Good night, I said, and I hung up. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand. I straightened the edge of my book, and I went back to sleep. I want to tell you that I slept peacefully, but that would be a slight exaggeration. I lay there in the dark for maybe 20 minutes, my mind running through possibilities. What would they do? Would they come home furious? Would Roxanne cry? Would there be a scene? But underneath all of that was something solid. Something I hadn't felt in months. It felt like my floor was back under my feet. My phone rang twice more that night. Once from Felix, once from a number I didn't recognize. Probably the hotel, I thought, or maybe his brother. I let both go to voicemail and did not listen to them until morning. At 6:45, I made coffee, took Duke outside because whatever else was happening, the dog still needed to go out and he wasn't the one who'd made my life difficult. Sat on my back porch with my mug and watched the February light come up slow and silver over the yard. At 8:12, my phone rang again. Number, I didn't know. Different from the night before. Ms. Nadine? A man's voice, professional, careful. This is Deputy Whitmore with the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. I set down my coffee. He explained that a Felix Carpenter had contacted local authorities the previous evening to report and here he paused, choosing words, dispute over access to funds. He wanted me to know they had spoken with my son-in-law and determined this was a civil matter, not a criminal one. He was calling as a courtesy. He asked if I was all right. I'm perfectly fine, I told him. Thank you for calling. Felix had called the police on me. On me. From a hotel in Asheville, where he and my daughter had apparently taken a weekend trip I hadn't been told about, charged to my account, and when that didn't work, he called the police. I hung up and sat very still for a moment. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I laughed. Not because it was funny exactly, but because the absurdity of it, the sheer breathtaking audacity, was so complete that laughter was the only response that made any sense. They came home that afternoon. I heard the car in the driveway. I was at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and my laptop, and I stayed exactly where I was. Felix came in first. He looked tired and cold and like a man who had spent the night in a hotel lobby or a car, which, it turned out, the hotel had indeed required them to vacate, and they'd spent several hours in a 24-hour diner waiting for morning. He looked at me and something crossed his face that I'd never seen on him before. It might have been shame. I can't be sure. Roxanne came in behind him and wouldn't meet my eyes. I did not raise my voice. I have never needed to raise my voice to make a point. Sit down, I said. Both of you. They sat. I had my notebook on the table, not for show, but because it was there, and it had been there for months, and they were going to know that. I'm going to say this once, I told them. I'm not going to debate it, I'm not going to negotiate it, and I'm not going to revisit it. I told them what I knew. The card transactions, all 47. The conversation I'd overheard about my property, the thermostat and the olive oil and the furniture, yes, even the furniture, because all of it was part of the same pattern, and I wanted them to understand that I had been watching and I had been documenting, and I was not the woman they'd apparently decided I was. Felix started to say something twice, and both times I kept talking. When I finished, I looked at my daughter. Roxanne, you are my child and I love you completely. That does not change. But you are 34 years old and this is my home, and what has happened here is not acceptable. She was crying by then. Quietly. She had her hands folded in her lap. You have 30 days, I said. That is more than enough time to make arrangements. I will not extend that deadline. Felix looked up at that. 30 days. Where are we supposed to go in 30 days? That, I said, is genuinely not my problem. He opened his mouth, closed it. I picked up my tea and my laptop and walked out to my back porch, and I closed the door behind me. The next 30 days were not easy. I won't pretend they were. There were arguments, mostly Felix, working through stages of anger the way certain people do when they realize a situation has moved beyond their control. There were tears from Roxanne, some of which were genuine and some of which I recognized as performance. There were several moments where I wondered if I was being too hard, if there was something I could have done differently, if a good mother would have found another way. But then I'd open my notebook and read back through it. The pattern was there. Clear, documented, consistent. This hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been carelessness. It had been a slow, deliberate erosion of the life I had built. My home, my finances, my peace. And if I had let it continue, where would I have been in another year? I also made some calls during those 30 days. My attorney Clara helped me remove Roxanne from any remaining financial accounts she was connected to. I had the locks rekeyed. Not dramatically, not as a statement, but practically. My house, my locks. I reviewed my retirement accounts and my will. I am not a wealthy woman in the way that word usually gets used, but I have been careful my whole life, and I have assets, and I needed them to be protected. 3 days before the deadline, Felix found an apartment. A 2-bedroom in a neighborhood about 20 minutes away. I know this because Roxanne told me, not because Felix said a word to me about it. He had stopped speaking to me directly after the 3rd week, communicating only through Roxanne, which honestly made the last stretch of the month considerably more peaceful. Moving day came on a Saturday. I made breakfast that morning, eggs, toast, coffee, and left a plate for Roxanne, which she ate at the kitchen counter with her coat already on. She looked young that morning. Not in a good way, in the way of someone who has realized something about their life that they weren't prepared to realize. "Mama," she said near the end, "I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long time. "I know you are, baby. I didn't think it would." She stopped. Tried again. "I didn't want it to go like this. I know." "Do you think?" Her voice caught. "Can we still have Sunday dinners?" I thought about that. About what it means to love someone fully and still require them to be accountable. About how those two things are not opposites. "Not for a while," I said. "But eventually, yes." She nodded. Didn't push it. Felix carried the last box out without looking at me. The door closed. I heard the truck start. I stood in my living room. My furniture where I put it, my thermostat at 72, my mother's love seat empty and clean, and I waited for some enormous feeling to come. It didn't. Not right away. What came instead was quiet. Not emptiness. Not sadness, though those came later at their own pace. Just quiet. The kind you forget is possible when you've been in the middle of something loud for a long time. Duke was gone too. Roxanne had taken him. I found one last clump of husky fur under the coffee table that afternoon, and I stood there holding it, and that, strangely, was when I cried. Not for Felix or the money or the 1,000 small indignities of the past 18 months, but for the version of things I had imagined when Roxanne first called me. The way I had pictured it, my daughter nearby, family dinners, being useful to people I loved. That version hadn't been real. But I'd wanted it to be. I swept up the fur, put the kettle on, went out and checked on my wisteria, which had died back for winter, but would bloom again in April. It's been 7 months. Roxanne and I have had 2 dinners, once at a restaurant, once at her apartment, which is modest and small, and hers. We are finding our way back slowly, the way you do after something real. Felix has not apologized. I don't expect him to. Some people don't have that in them. My bank account is whole. My house is mine. I sleep through the night. Last week, Roxanne called me on a Tuesday evening just to talk, not to ask for anything. We spoke for an hour and a half about nothing in particular. Her job, my garden, a documentary we'd both watched. At the end of the call, she said, "I love you, Mama." "I love you too," I said, and I meant it. All of it, and nothing else, just that.